So let's start off this section with a scripture reading from Genesis chapter 3. This is in verse 8. Here's what it says. They heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" He said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." And so I just want to pause there for a second. So, of course, this first question that we read about, what is the question that God asked Adam and Eve, or asked Adam?
Where are you?
Where are you? Right? Where are you? Now, again, God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent. God knows all things. You think God knows where Adam's hiding? I mean,
Yes.
you think he just walked over there and be like, "I see you're hiding over here," right? There you are. But why does God ask the question, "Where are you?" Well, what is the purpose of that?
To elicit an answer. So start a conversation.
I love that. Yeah, to elicit an answer, to start a conversation. Absolutely. I want to read a little bit for you from our book. This will be on page 17 if you have it. If you don't, that's okay. But, you know, I'll read the second paragraph down. Here's what it says. It says, "The question leads us into searching the heart of God. It reminds us that God always pursues us in love. Nothing can ever extinguish the flame in God's heart that burns to be in personal relationship with us, even when we mess up and get terribly lost. When God asks us, 'Where are we?' it is as if God is saying to you and me, 'Where are you? I miss you. My heart aches for you. I want to reconnect with you. I grieve over the distance between us. I long for your companionship, and I will search for you until I find you.'" And we're going to get into a New Testament reading here in a minute. But what does it mean for God to have what you might call a searching heart?
Means that we can't really wander out of God's realm and protection and love. He searches us out.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a great modern song called "Reckless Love" that has some lyrics that attest to that. That, you know, yeah, if you look it up, it's a great song. Yeah. Well, what else does it mean for God to have a searching heart?
Well, it means you can't run from him. You may try, but you can't.
Yeah, and you can, but God always follows you, right?
Right. He's going to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you believe that God has been seeking us out our whole lives, or do you think that's something that just starts at some point in life? What do y'all think about that?
From birth. You know, our parents reflect God's love. I think it's from birth.
Yeah. There's this idea in the United Methodist Church that we call Prevenient Grace. You've probably heard that before, but that's the idea that before we can respond to God, that God is reaching out to us. And I like to put it this way. You know, the Calvinist among us would say that we have total depravity, right? That when Adam and Eve committed that first sin in the Garden of Eden, that our relationship with God was completely severed, right? Total depravity, totally depraved of God. And I would say we in the Methodist Church put maybe a lowercase t on that total depravity, in that, yes, we believe that relationship was broken and mightily broken but we still believe that God is at work within us, or is working on us even before we can speak, talk, walk, any of those things. That God is reaching out to us, and we believe that we have the ability to respond to that Godness that's seeking after us. Does that make sense? And so, yeah, because of that, with Prevenient Grace, I believe that God, before we can walk, talk, eat, breathe, that God is pursuing us and continues to pursue us. And what are some ways that God does pursue us in infancy, when you're teenagers, when you're a toddler? What are some ways that God pursues us?
Well, I think of perhaps especially as a teenager, but other times also, your conscience comes up and says you shouldn't ought to be doing that, or think about it seriously. And so it's in your mind. Then I could either do it, or I'll go ahead and do it anyway, or no, I guess I better hadn't, because of my upbringing, because of I think, friends. I think your conscience is God speaking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think God speaks that way. And, I can remember, I grew up in church, was out of church, and especially those years I was out of church. Not that I was in anything terrible, but stuff that would get folks in trouble, and especially get folks grounded for a long time, right? And I always remember my friends would say I got away with everything because, I'd be with my friends and we'd be doing something like, it wasn't anything terrible, but, like taking those big fireworks that shoot up into the sky and explode, and, going to the school playground and burying them in the sand, so explode on the ground. And of course the neighbors didn't like that, and all that kind of just not bad stuff, but stuff that do often cause the police to respond and tell you to leave, right? And yeah, I would always, in the midst of that, I would feel my conscience start to speak to me, and I would say, you know what, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see y'all later. And then inevitably, I'd be gone like 10 minutes. The police would show up and kick them off, right? And so, yeah, I think God certainly speaks through your conscience. What are some other ways that God speaks, that God pursues us?
Through caring and
He places people in your life.
Why don't you go first, Deborah, and then I'll come to you, Betty, okay?
I think he places people in you along the way as you're growing up, as you go to your job. He just places people in your life that draw you to him and that have an empty life.
Yeah, absolutely. Have y'all had people in your lives that have helped guide you in the right way?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm sure many of you have. And Betty, what were you going to say?
that was the same thing. Caring people, godly people,
Absolutely. And yeah, and that is, I would say, the number one thing, the number one way God speaks and that God works. And I've said this before, we talk about miracles and these big things, but the number one way that God works is how?
Through us.
Through us, right? Through God's people, and through God's people often saying yes when it would be really easy to say no. This became really apparent to me when we became foster parents. Because we were getting kids in our lives that come from hard backgrounds and connected with a lot of kids with hard backgrounds, and especially with some of the kids you'd meet that didn't come into care until they were 15, 16 years old. You look at their upbringing and the life and the people that were in their life, and many of these kids had very few people. Really and truly caring for them, right? Putting their time into their lives, putting care into their lives. And, sometimes you had a teacher or a counselor or somebody that was doing that, but, it often wasn't the parents. And you look at some of these kids and where they are and the way they act, and you think, they didn't have a chance, right? And it's so hard to look at that and see that when when I know and we know that at an early age, if you can have people surrounding you who care, man, you stand a much better chance of living a life that's full of meaning and productivity and all that stuff. And I think that's one of the things that hit me the hardest was just how so many kids, fall through the cracks. Yeah. Any other ways that God pursues us? Yeah, I think God uses every opportunity to make God's self known, right? Now, I don't think God causes horrible things to happen to people in their lives, but I think God certainly uses those sometimes to draw people back. That when maybe in your life you've had a time that was just really hard and really difficult, and maybe you remember somebody stepping up and being there for you in a way that made you think differently. Yeah. I want to move on to another scripture reading now, and that's a scripture reading from the Gospel according to Luke in the 15th chapter. And as a matter of fact, if somebody wants to find that, it'll be Luke 15, verse 8 through 10. If you find, whoever finds it can read it.
Come on, one sheet. They don't make sheets as thin as they used to here. Luke 15, 8 through 10?
You got it.
Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of all the angels of God over one sinner who repents.
I love that. Thank you. And of course, this is a parable that I think speaks about God's heart of searching and desiring for us to come to Him. And I love this story too because, the woman stops looking for a coin when she's been at it for 4 hours, right? Well, no. She stops when she's moved all the furniture out of the way, right? Well, no. When does she stop?
And she finds it.
Yeah. When she finds it, she stops. True story. So this is that's my wedding ring. Y'all see it? This was actually my grandfather's wedding ring. Now he had huge hands, and so I had to take it and have it melted down and reshaped for me. But it's pretty heavy because he had giant fingers. But at my last appointment, I lost my wedding ring. You ready for this? For 3.5 years.
Wow.
For 3.5 years. And when I first lost it, I would search and search and search and search and search, but I never really stopped searching. Like every now and again, as we were cleaning the house, I would look under things, I would look on top of things, I would search and search and search and search. Well, after 3.5 years, I was cleaning our bathroom and noticed that we had been collecting for years toilet paper rolls for students and for everyone, and for Pages Crafts and all that stuff on top of the medicine cabinet in our bathroom. And so I thought, those have been up there forever. I'm going to just stick them in a bag and get rid of them. And so I took all the toilet paper rolls and put them in a bag. And lo and behold, in the very back, against the wall, was
Oh my goodness.
my wedding ring, right? And so I'm assuming what happened is I got in to take a shower, and I put this on top of the medicine cabinet, which I often did, and probably left it up there for a little while. And then the first toilet paper roll must have gone on top of it, right? And then slowly but surely it got slid back underneath that toilet paper roll. And it wasn't until I cleaned those up that it was found. And but yeah, 3.5 years. And I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours looking for it. But what do you think I did when I found it?
Rejoiced.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you think I rejoiced?
You ran to Paige and said, "Look what I found."
That's the first thing I did. You're right. You're right. We're married again. No. But yeah, I rejoiced. I called my parents and I told my brother and rejoiced because it was something meaningful for me that I'd lost and then found. And, you know, if that's how we rejoice after finding what amounts to a meaningful bit of gold, right? Then how much more does God rejoice when someone who is lost comes to the Lord and finds God. And again, I think God never stops searching. So in our first reading today, we read that Adam and Eve, the question is, where are you? And where were they? What were they doing?
Hiding.
They were hiding, right? Why were they hiding?
Because they were naked.
They knew they had done wrong.
Yeah, they were ashamed, right? They knew they were naked. They were ashamed. They had, broken God's law. They hid, right? There's a interesting story here in the book on page 18, which I'll read for you. Here's what it says. It says, a man one day went to a doctor because he was very depressed. The doctor examined him and found his physical condition to be in good shape. He said to the man, there's a circus in town with a marvelous clown by the name of Grimaldi. Everybody that goes to see him laughs. Why don't you go and do the same thing? He'll make you laugh and you'll feel much better. The patient replied, doctor, that won't help. I am Grimaldi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the author says here, he says, I'll keep reading. He says, a lot of us are like Grimaldi. We hide who we really are. We hide from those around us and from God. Sometimes we may even try to hide from ourselves as well. We hide because we believe that if we are known for who we really are, we will not be acceptable. So we go through much of our lives continually projecting images of who we are and who we are not. Behind these facades, there exists the real person, the real me, but who sometimes is so well hidden that we may not even know our true thoughts or feelings. Man, what do y'all think? Do we hide?
Absolutely.
Sure.
And I want to go a little bit farther on this question. Is it okay to hide sometimes? You may talk
Yes.
a little more about this. Sorry, go ahead, Betty.
Yeah, I think sometimes we need the space from ourselves, from other people, from God. And God is still there, so he's searching for us when we are hiding. But yeah, I think we do need to hide sometimes.
Yeah, I think
We may
about.
need
Sorry, go ahead.
we may need to hide for protection. I mean, everyone around you doesn't have good intentions.
Right.
So
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and this specifically talks about in our relationship with God, and I think in general we want to be honest with God about where we are. Although sometimes you might be like me, it's even hard to be honest with ourselves sometimes, right? We want to be honest to God about those things, and I would hope that we have at least a group of people or person whom we can really be truly honest with as well, right? And somebody that we know is going to keep that confidence. And but sometimes I think when people talk about not hiding and being an open book and sharing, there are parts of life that we may not want to share with everybody, and I think that's okay, right? And interesting what you said, Sarah. Sometimes we hide for safety, right? Sometimes we hide for safety.
Yeah.
What would be a time when we would do that? Yeah. Was that a cuckoo clock I heard?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
There may be people that are trying to hurt you, either emotionally or physically. I mean, you've got to be careful on the internet not to click on something. I mean, you just don't want to be an open book.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we hide parts of our life to protect other people.
Yeah.
If you You may be protecting your parents from knowledge that they would find painful, or your spouse from knowledge that they might find painful. So, I mean, I think sometimes you hide parts of your life to protect not only yourself, but others you love.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think rightfully so many times, right? I think about dementia patients I've worked with and family is, wherever their mind ends up at that time I'm talking to them, that's where I'm going to be, right? They might be thinking it's 20 years ago and folks are still alive who are dead. But it may be that I'm hiding some of the true world to be in conversation with them, but I think that's appropriate, right?
I have a brother who's been hiding really from the world for 6 years now. He has not left his house in 6 years, except maybe twice a year to go to a doctor, which you had to beg him to do and threaten him to do. But he can't come out of hiding. That's a very sad, it's a very, very sad thing. And there's no understanding it, by the other members. But for some reason, he has hidden himself from society, really. Social anxiety. He hides in his home, So, but that's an extreme case of hiding. And he, for a long time when this first started, he would tell me that the Lord had turned his back on him, and he was very involved in his church. He taught Sunday school every Sunday. He went through some kind of crisis that caused this. And, but now I know that he's beginning to pray again. So that is a hopeful thing, but that's a very sad kind of hiding.
That is. And it makes me wonder, I mean, those must have been some pretty deep wounds that I would say likely the church or some people in church may have caused.
No, he had always been a caregiver for his family. They had a child that had extreme epilepsy, and he had been a caregiver. He got prostate cancer himself, and he came actually to Spartanburg for surgery. It was an aggressive cancer, but they got it all. It was a great outcome, but he has never been the same.
Oh, wow.
So I think it might have just been the last stressor,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think we had things, especially in a new relationship. I mean, the first time I asked Betty if she wanted to go somewhere, as we started going out, not dating, but going out, there were gradually little snippets of, this is going to be a deal breaker for sure if I reveal this. And I'm very thankful that we worked through those things. But she may be right, and I may have been right too. If I said, well, let me tell you all about all the skeletons in my closet before we go and see a play up in a Flat Rock Playhouse, she'd say, well, you're worse than Ezekiel there. You got too many skeletons there. Or she may have said the same thing. So we had things until we develop
comfortable
and develop the confidence that the other person is truly interested in us and can either help us with those things or say, well, that's in the past, let's just forget about it. So
yeah, and another way to put that, I think, would be, we tell the best truth we can, right? We lose Deborah.
Yeah, she fell off the edge of the world.
I'll send her a message here. But yeah, we tell the best truth we can for the situation we're in, right? I think we should be very honest with children about, we're very honest with our kids about adoption and all that kind of stuff, but they're not of the age yet where that full kind of story of what the parents have done and gone through and all that is appropriate to tell them, right? And so we tell them the best truth that we can. And I think the same thing is true in early parts of relationships as well. You tell people the best truth of who you are for that stage of your relationship, right? And eventually you get to that point where hopefully you're an open book. But yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Any other reasons why we hide? Okay, cool.
Well, I think we hide because we fear the consequences in a relationship with somebody else. And so we may hide it, but hopefully we're trying to work through in our own minds, how can I fix this problem?
Yeah, say that one more time, Wick. I'm sorry.
I just said, I think sometimes we hide because we feel if another person in our lives knew the true thing, it could cause irreparable damage. And, I mean, that's still there. And hopefully we can work through that, and work through how we can communicate with the other person and move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. Good. Anything else about reasons why we hide or why we hide? All right. Y'all ready for another story? I'm going to read you another portion of the book here. This is on page 21, if you happen to have it. And so what this person talks about is a person in their life who helped guide them from hiding into light. So I'll just read it for you. The following story is by Renee Outson. She has guided my efforts in learning how to love those who are hurting deeply. This testimony comes from her book, Stumbling Towards Faith. As a child, Renee was raped repeatedly by her father while he sang Christian choruses and recited the Lord's Prayer. Later, her addicted and homeless mother abandoned her. Superficial responses by Christians to the pain she was experiencing only deepened her sense of alienation. When she had almost given up on Christianity, someone entered her life who made God's love real. She describes the experience like this. So these are her words. He lived God's love into me through his love. He cared about me, was willing to spend time with me, and embraced me in all of my fractured disbelief and doubt. He didn't give me pat answers. In fact, many times he didn't give me any answers at all. Rather, he gave me permission to be without them, an indescribable gift. He gave me the space to ask questions, to be honest, to struggle, to grieve. I felt the freedom to be half finished. I felt the freedom to cry, to mourn for all I had lost. I felt that God loved me in the midst of my half-finished mourning, that he heard me when I cried. I felt that love through my friend, a love that was gentle and patient and playful. He helped bring life and hope to me. He saw my deadness and my brokenness and entered into it instead of trying to talk me out of it. He acknowledged my despair and then quietly, without words, pointed the way to something bigger than him. He pointed me to springtime and light and life, all the while acknowledging the winter, the darkness, and the pain. I mean, what an incredible, well-written thoughts about how this person had, just poured God's love into them. And it's interesting, this woman, with all she had been through as a child and all of that, there was a lot of darkness. There was a lot of hurt. Do you think she had reasons to hide? And we look at, sorry, go ahead.
We're just
We look
saying,
at people. Sorry, really go ahead, Betty.
we're just saying yes. She did have a lot of reasons to hide.
Yeah, and often we talk about people who have put up walls, right? And I find that walls are almost always there for a good reason. There's been something that happened that has caused those walls, and I never like the idea of tearing down walls, but rather, if we're gonna get rid of them, dismantling them brick by brick is how it happens and how it needs to happen, right? I can imagine with what this woman went through, there was a lot of hiding and a lot of walls and a lot of just hurt and pain. And it sounds like whoever this was that entered into her life, what did he do that you think was different than other people in her life, than other Christians in her life?
But to me, as you shared the story, her main, she didn't trust anybody, why would she? So I think he was there and she learned he would be there, whether she was having a good day or a bad day or hiding or open, he was there and she could begin to trust a person.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes we as Christians, if we're not careful, can attempt to say words of comfort that can actually invalidate how somebody is feeling and invalidate their experience. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If a loved one dies, or God forbid a child dies, right? Somebody might say something like, well, it was just their time, or God needed them home, right? And I think that's said as a word of comfort. But boy, I'm sure it's not taken that way, right? And I don't think it should be taken that way. I think what it's doing is invalidating the grief that this person that I loved is not here, and I am grieving and upset and maybe angry about it, right? And we need to be okay when people feel that way. You know what I mean? It's okay to feel that way, and I will never try to talk somebody out of that grief. It's interesting. We talk about people hiding themselves and who they are. As pastors, we do this as well, especially when it comes to counseling and that kind of stuff. I remember in seminary when I was working as a chaplain, you're meeting people with all sorts of theologies, right? And some different religions. Just all over the place. And it wasn't a rare occasion when I would go into a hospital room and there'd be somebody who's died, and the family would be gathered around and weeping and praying and I would ask them to tell me some about their child or whoever passed away, and eventually they might get into something to the effect of, I truly believe that he was too good for this world, that God just needed another angel, that it was his time to go, right? And I don't believe that's the way things work. I don't think God works that way. That's not how my theology is. But in that moment, that is not the time to be bringing in my theological understanding of death, right? And so when I would pray with that family, I would hide part of my theological understanding to pray exactly what they gave me, right? We are happy, O Lord, that you have another angel in your midst who is with you, right? Because that is where they are. And as a chaplain, your goal is to meet them where they are. Does that make sense? And so I know that this hiding of who we are can certainly be a negative thing, right? And what we've done, and we certainly need those people we can be true and honest with. But in some ways, I think it's okay to hide, and maybe the limitation is it's okay to hide when it's for the goodness of others, right? And not always, but I don't know.
Well,
So
I think about the missionaries, such as where Kathy and Don were,
yeah.
Or even more so people that go to Muslim countries. You have to hide your Christianity together, or you could be arrested, thrown out of the country, and then gradually, through your example and perhaps one-on-one with people, you may feel you have enough trust in a person that you can reveal that you're a Christian, and here's the benefits we see for that. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people that go into these countries where Christianity is not accepted have to go in as something else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, we see that in church history as well, from the early church. Do you know what one of the things early Christians were accused of being in the early church? They were accused of being cannibals, right? Because Christianity wasn't accepted. And so if you came out as a Christian, they would arrest you and beat you and kill you. And so then Christians would hide to have worship and to have church and whatever. And what's that weird thing we do on communion Sundays?
Take the body and bread and the body and blood.
Right. This is the body of Christ. This is the blood of Christ. They thought Christians were hiding in the basement, eating flesh and drinking blood, right? All because they had to hide so they wouldn't, get arrested. And so, yeah, I think there can be good reasons to hide. But I think what this book's getting at is, we should certainly be honest with God, and also have at least a few folks in our life who we can be honest with and not hide from. Yeah. All right, we're almost done here. A few final questions. All right, this is a don't have to answer, but think about it yourself question. Okay. Where are you at this moment in your relationship with God? So if God was to say, "Where are you?" How would you answer that? So just take a moment to ponder that, to think about that. If you want to share, by all means, but you certainly don't have to. All right, next question to think about. How do you sometimes hide from God and those around you? Let's just talk about that first part of that question. We talked about the folks around you and how sometimes it's okay, sometimes not. But how do you sometimes hide from God, if you do?
Sometimes it's tempting to just close the office door.
Okay, so you say you close the office door?
Right.
Okay.
Now here I can't. No doors.
I gotcha. Yeah, that's certainly a good place to hide, that's for sure. Yeah. I find sometimes in small ways, I hide from God in prayers. That somehow I figure that if I don't tell God everything, if I whitewash it a little bit, like it'll be better. Does that make sense? I don't know if any of y'all do that sometimes too, but sometimes I do that, I don't know, try to justify things or even in my prayers. Yeah. Any other ways we hide from God? All right. How about this? When did you first become aware of God's personal love for you? Can you point to a moment or a season when you became aware of God's personal love? Or has it always been there? Yeah, I saw you shaking your head there. Yeah. Man, y'all are quiet on this one, huh? It's all right. So I would say, perhaps for most of us, there have probably been a journey and moments that have led us. Now, for some folks, there's that pull your car over on the interstate, God's hit you over the head with a 2x4, you realize God's personal love. But for me, it's been a journey, growing up in church and having that love poured into me. And then moments when I've realized generally through others that this love that God has for me is different than any love I've experienced before. Right.
one of my favorite sayings is that, in talking about, just what you said, the 2x4 as opposed to just growing up in the faith, is some of us choose in and others of us ooze in,
Okay. Choose in, others ooze in. I like that. I do. That's neat. Yeah, and in some Christian circles, there's this idea that you have to have that moment of that personal moment of faith experience and acceptance. And I think God works in all ways. I think there are journeys that get us there, and I think there are moments that get us there. And usually for most of us, it's a combination of both.
Well, when I heard the choosing and oozing, they said, if you ooze in, there still has to be a time that you realize you have arrived, that God's love is for you and that you're living for him. I mean, you can't just, seep in and not be aware of that. But, you can't define a moment when the 2x4 hits you,
But it still leaves you in a quandary. For instance, if you, using Betty's idea of oozing in, you feel a very strong relationship, but you have a friend that can name the day, the hour, the minute that it happened. And in some ways, either they try or you feel inadequate because you can't say, oh yeah, well, that happened to me 2 years ago. So is that hiding? Sometimes, back to your question on hiding, if you can't answer their question of exactly the day and the minute when it happened.
I have a suggestion. Maybe that 2x4 is sometimes glued together. Sometimes maybe it comes in a whole bunch of toothpicks.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Nice.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
We had a visit one night, I don't know, it was 2007 or something. And after the minister asked me, when did I find God? And I said, well, he's always been there. Seconds later, he didn't even talk to me after that. Yeah. My only assumption is he thought I was unsaved and I guess unsavable. I don't know.
Yeah, you're probably right, Dale. You're probably right. I used to have with my Baptist days, I had a preacher that would, most Sundays would say, do you know that you know that you know that you know when you die that you're going to go to heaven? And everybody would say, yes, I know, they had that assurance of faith, if you will. But in my praying and my working through my own relationship with God, I've come to realize that I'm not dead yet. And I don't know exactly. I believe what's on the other side, and I have an overwhelming hope of what's next. But do I know that I know that I know? I don't know how I can. Does that make sense? I don't know that I can, and so I hope and I believe, and I have some assurance of that. But know that I know that I know. Well, I don't, right? I hope and I believe, but I don't know, and I think that's okay, right? It's okay to have that question and to struggle with those things, and I think God understands that struggle with faith. My Baptist preacher would not be proud of me, but go ahead, Dale.
If you're wondering why I'm wandering in and out, it's because the air conditioning man came about half an hour ago. And so I was letting him in and just making sure I was available in case he needed access to something.
So you've been without AC?
Since last night.
Oh man, let me see the top of your head. Is it as shiny as mine?
You can be sure of it. Wick, you don't count. You have to do some work on that.
That's right. Well, I certainly hope you get some nice cooling breezes soon. Good. Okay. Well, excellent. Well, as we go throughout this week, I would just invite you to continue to ask the question, where are you? Right. Where are you in your relationship with God? How has that changed? And then finally, and we won't go through this, but who are the people in your life that have made God's love real for you? Who has God put in your path to help make you who you are and to help ground you in your relationship with Christ? And I'll leave you to think about that yourself, because it's 11:28 and we're just about to end. So chapter 2 next week, and like I said, you can come by and get a book, and if you have one, read through it, is the question, where is your brother? So, I think we got some Cain and Abel coming on here pretty soon. So where is your brother? And invite you to check that out for next week. But thank you for joining us virtually. So just so everybody knows, we will continue to be virtual at 10:30 if anybody wants to or can't make it at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evenings. However, these studies will be very similar. And so feel free to come to a virtual one, come to one in person, go back to another virtual one. However you want to study is totally fine. Sound good?
That's good.
All right, everybody good?
Thank
Good.
you for what you're
Thank
doing
you.
there.
Well, thank you. Appreciate, really enjoyed the discussion today. And I'm going to use that 2x4 toothpicks kind of thing. That'll be nice. That's good. And Sarah, we're all jealous of you.
We are.
Well, you shouldn't be. It's pouring down rain here.
Oh,
It's pouring.
Well, at least you have air conditioning, so we're not envious of you, Dale.
Well, that's true. It is cold.
All right. Well, y'all have a blessed day. We'll see y'all soon, okay?
Thanks. Bye-bye.